Yeah, you know that turkey? The one in the poulterer's shop? Yeah, has anyone bought that yet? They have, okay. No, that's fine. I'm just not getting redemption this year. Goodbye. They didn't have phones in Victorian England anyway. So with Christmas almost upon us, what better time to take a look at film adaptations of one of the most famous Christmas stories ever, of course Dickens' Christmas Carol. This is not a comprehensive list by any means. Today I'm looking strictly at live action adaptations. Maybe next year or some other occasion I will review some of the cartoon ones. This also won't cover any television episode adaptations like Sanford and Son's Ebenezer Sanford or something like that. We're going to look at strictly live action, mostly theatrical, some TV adaptations. So please comment your favorites below, ones I mentioned or didn't mention. We're going to look at pretty much straight adaptations with one exception and a couple sort of exceptions. We'll get into that. The oldest one I have is the 1910 version, produced by Edison Films. At about 10 minutes, it's pretty short and sweet, kind of just like a highlight reel of the story, just giving all the major points a real quick once-over. It's really neat to watch, though, from a historical perspective, and the ghost effects hold up pretty well. Definitely, if you like the story, one worth checking out, or if you're interested in getting into very early films, this is a really nice collection, too, of very old Christmas films, like the 100 years or more like 110 in some cases, but good stuff there. Let's look at sound films now. That's the only silent one I've seen. The earliest sound one is from 1935. It is the British adaptation known as Scrooge, starring Sir Seymour Hicks. I only have it in this 50 movie pack. I love these Mill Creek 50 movie packs. Yes, the audio and visual quality of most of the films is total garbage. I'm very nostalgic for them because when they were new, when I was a teenager, it was a good way to build your collection quickly. This version of Scrooge, starring Seymour Hicks, who played the part on stage and in silent films too, I believe, is pretty good. It's a nice adaptation of the story. This is an edited copy, running only about an hour, so there's 10-15 minutes of footage missing. I like Hicks's Scrooge. He's, mean when he needs to be and nice when he needs to be. There's some really cool ideas about the contrast between how the rich celebrate Christmas and the poor. It's nothing really remarkable, and it's been done, better as time's gone on, I think. But all told, a good place to start for sound films. And Philip Frost is a good Tiny Tim, and Donald Calthrop, who best remembered from many early Hitchcock films, he makes a good Bob Cratchit. One that's much more recognizable from 1938, Reginald Owen as Scrooge in A Christmas Carol, seen up there with Terry Kilburn's Tiny Tim. I don't know, I used to say this was my favorite one. I'm not sure. I have to think about that. But an hour and some change. It's economical, but does the story justice. Leo G. Carroll has a small role as Jacob Marley's ghost. It's got a lot of good parts to it. Scrooge actually fires Cratchit, and, yeah, it's aged. I think parts of it are very sentimental, but it tells the story well, I think. And it's not one that plays up the mystery or the supernatural part. It's more, how does everybody feel at Christmas time and stuff that comes from the heart. Probably the most popular version from 1951, Alastair Sim played Scrooge in this version of A Christmas Carol. This is the colorized one with the pretty cool white plastic VHS. Love it. Also hosted by Patrick Macnee, who appears briefly, a young Patrick Macnee, before he was John Steed even, appears to talk about, the film's importance to him and his family, and to kind of host the colorized version. He has an intro and outro segment. You can find those on YouTube. Quality-wise, terrific film. Sim is one of the best Scrooges ever, and bitter when he needs to be, and very convincing when he becomes happy and nice at the end. One of the first ones to play up the fact that Victorian London would have been filthy and grimy and disgusting and everyone would have been sick. A must-see, if you're, especially, not even if you're a fan of A Christmas Carol, honestly. Must-see. Certainly one of the finest adaptations. So by 1970, as we have Scrooge here, people didn't want to see just a straight adaptation anymore. They wanted something different. So here we got a musical adaptation Songs by Leslie Bricusse, who wrote music for like Dr. Dolittle and some James Bond theme tunes like Goldfinger. The songs are really catchy. I've seen this version done on stage before. I actually saw it on stage before I saw this film. But, you know, it's a feel-good kind of film at the end, maybe a little too schmaltzy. And Phineas Scrooge tends to be pretty polarizing. As a younger man made up to play an older fellow, you know, he does a lot of weird things. It looks like he's having a stroke sometimes with how much he grimaces and crouches and stuff. But overall, I think he does well. My favorite thing about this is Alec Guinness as Jacob Marley, who plays Marley as sympathetic but also vindictive, and at the end he helps Scrooge when he's imagining himself in hell and being shackled up and all this stuff that I don't recall being in the original text, but it makes for interesting visuals. So, yeah, maybe a little maudlin, and if you don't like musicals, you'd probably want to skip it. And about 2 hours, maybe a little too long for some people, but, you know, worth seeing. And I think Finney's a good Scrooge. Let's get into some of the weirder territory here from 1978. Rich Little's Christmas Carol. Rich Little as W.C. Fields as Scrooge, and just about every other part as well. This is one of those things where if you don't know the references, if you don't know who Johnny Carson was, or Columbo, or Inspector Clouseau, or something like that, this will make no sense to you. Like, you know, the young people that I teach, I would never show them this. They wouldn't get most of the jokes. But, like last Christmas, I watched it with my parents, and they loved it. You know, the Watergate tapes are Jacob Marley's chain, and Truman Capote as Tiny Tim, and such weird stuff. You know, Johnny Carson as Fred. I should say Rich Little as all these people, but he does a nice job. Yeah, it's kind of weird that he plays so many parts, and it does, as the wonderful review on Hats Off Entertainment noted, it does kind of affect the timing and the blocking of shots and stuff, but all told, it's an interesting time capsule. I always enjoy it. One I don't enjoy, easily the worst film on this list, Scrooge's Rock and Roll Christmas. This was used as the thumbnail for my last video. I wasn't going to, and I thought, it's such a weird visual. This is not a Christmas Carol adaptation, despite being marketed as such. This, from 1983, is a collection of music videos with Jack Elam, seen here, as Scrooge, in kind of this weird framing device. But there's no ghost of Christmas past, present, or future. There's no Jacob Marley, there's no Tiny Tim. It's just, you know, they took a public domain property and used that as a means to showcase these music videos. It is really completely pointless. I don't think it's ever been released on any format past VHS, but you can certainly find it on YouTube, or at least parts of it on YouTube. Mike Love of the Beach Boys is in it, and indeed, there's reference to buying Beach Boys albums for Christmas. Yeah, what are they going to buy? Beach Boys rarities? Nobody bought Beach Boys rarities. But anyway, I guess as a weird look at 80s music video entertainment, it might be interesting. But this one is skippable, and it's the worst one here because it's not even an adaptation. I wasn't going to include it, but it's such a weird novelty I had to. One that is very well remembered, probably the most stately of all of them. The made-for-TV 1984 version with George C. Scott, Patton himself as Scrooge. Definitely worth a watch there. Some people say this is the end-all be-all of Christmas Carol adaptations. It's not my favorite, I don't think. It's a little too slow-paced in places and kind of draggy, but overall, I think it does the story justice, and it's got a lot of really good visuals. And you wouldn't think it was a made-for-television production either. One that is actually a pretty accurate adaptation, The Muppet Christmas Carol from 1992. Michael Caine's Scrooge is loved by some and hated by others. I think he does a pretty good job. It's got to be kind of strange acting opposite dozens of puppets, but he, you know, does it well. I can't complain. The songs are great, done by Paul Williams. He did music for Phantom of the Paradise. Very underrated film. It's got a lot of good gags in it. I mean, if you don't like the Muppets, you're not going to get anything out of it. But it works as an adaptation and as a family comedy. Like Mickey's Christmas Carol, it isn't afraid to shy away from the darker aspects of the story. Someday I'll review Mickey's Christmas Carol, but, you know, that's a good one. And one that you could share with your family, maybe get youngsters into Christmas Carol adaptations. 1999, here's Patrick Stewart. I hadn't seen this one till recently. I liked it. Patrick Stewart wasn't quite as commanding as Scrooge as I thought he'd be, but I like some of the directions the story goes, adapting things like Scrooge, seeing sailors celebrating in an isolated ship at sea. That was nice, and it definitely looks nice. I think it captures a lot of that Victorian grime pretty well. I believe this was made for television, if I remember correctly. Please tell me if I'm wrong. I liked it. Not my favorite, but up there pretty high. And I think the worst of the straight adaptations is saved here for last with 2004's musical Christmas Carol. You know, I was sold as soon as I saw Fraser Crane as Scrooge and George Costanza as Jacob Marley, but this one is just kind of lacking. It feels very cheap. They were definitely going for the glitzy, glamorous, big-budget musical. In the early 2000s, we saw things like Chicago and Moulin Rouge and these huge musical extravaganzas using older properties. This is trying so hard to do that and mostly failing. And yeah, it's kind of a disappointment. Kelsey Grammer, I think, was a letdown as Scrooge, too. He doesn't really make the impression I think he would make, because he could be kind of a pedantic and funny Scrooge, but that doesn't really happen, so I don't know. But I'm glad I saw it. Something different. This certainly isn't everything, and there are new adaptations being made every year. But I thought we'd take a quick stroll through memory lane there, and again, please share your favorite Christmas Carol adaptations below. And I wish all of you a very happy holiday season, and a happy new year as well. And please come back for more Betamax Blocker content in 2023, because I love having you here. Be safe, be warm, and share some Christmas joy. Just don't watch this one.